Well, refresh my memory on your teaching experience.
What, the whole thing, or just how I'd engaged as a teacher?
You just told me something about how it felt.
Yeah, so there were times when I was teaching where I loved it. They tended to be, if I was speaking about my favorite times, it would be with a group of students analyzing poetry and just having a poem right in front of you, not having looked at it previously, and just working on that poem with them, asking the questions and seeing where that went. And I loved that because it seemed such poetry analysis can often dissect the poem and you end up with a dead poem. But it seemed such a creative endeavor, and seeing all these minds thinking and asking questions. I think what I loved to see was questioning. I really think that asking questions is the most important thing you can do as someone who's learning. And for a teacher to have students who want to ask questions, who are engaged enough to ask questions, is where the life is. All teachers can fill the time with garbage, time-consuming waste, which is very depressing. I did see these statistics from time to time, but I saw it was a post. I think it was a post on Twitter about this child who'd just gone to public school from home ed, and the post was from the teacher, and saying this child had been there like a week and was now leaving because the child came and said to the teacher, well, we spend all this time at the beginning of the lesson getting ready, and then you give the instructions like 3 or 4 times and people still don't know what they're doing, and then we waste all this time during the lesson, and so much time was wasted. And the teacher commented, said, I gave her a package. We talk about homework in England. Gave her a package of work, and she returned it the next day, completed. And it was meant to be a 2-week package. But there was a difference in expectation. Expectation is absolutely vital as a teacher. You need to expect your students to do great things and be capable of great things, even the non-promising things. Again, I think they've done studies on this where they tell the group of teachers to have student teachers in, and they say, this is a really gifted group. All right, and then they have another, and this is the group who are really struggling. And the outcomes at the end is that the ones where the teachers expect them to be good do well, and the ones who are expected to be poor do badly. And yet, actually, the truth about the students was that they were primarily both the same sort of levels. So it was about teacher expectations of their students. Yeah.
And in that case, the students sense and meet those expectations.
Oh, I think they do. I know students can be damaged by the things teachers say to them.
And vice versa. Right? They can be encouraged.
Oh yes. I thought you were about what students say to teachers.
Well, I think that's true too. I think it's, you got a bunch of humans in the room.
Yeah. A private school where I taught, and it was very exam orientated for the entrance exams and things, and it was set so that the students were put in sets according to their ability, and the ability was based on their mathematical ability. So if you were good at maths, you were in top sets. And I remember having this conversation with a child. Well, the parents were there, and I always like that, to have the parents present talking to a student, because sometimes the student would be saying one thing to the parents, and the parents were saying so actually close the loop and let's all be together. But this student said, well, I'm good at maths. I'm no good at English. And I just said, right, so I want you to treat your English studies as if it were maths. Approach it as a mathematician. Approach this novel as a mathematician. See what happens. Because it just caused him to start thinking and to ask the questions. And asking the questions is key. You might come up with answers that someone might say, well, actually, that's not right. But it just becomes a habit forming. And I think one of the things that inspired me in my younger years was reading the essays of C.S. Lewis. And I thought, how does this man think? Because I want to think like that. He'd be talking about the culture, and I love that engagement with the culture. And it was one thing. It would be asking questions about, well, what's going on here? I think as Christians, don't include Bethany in this, but generally Christians and churches don't engage with the culture, and I think we have to. I'm a huge fan of Larry Norman, the great lamented Larry Norman, and we drove back from New England to Minnesota about a month back, and the last leg, which was about 700 miles, we were coming back to Minnesota in the dark, and I was thinking, yay, because felt like coming home. But Jennifer had fallen asleep, and so I was driving in the dark. The roads were pretty empty, which is, again, something you don't really encounter in England. And the roads were pretty empty, and I just had Larry Norman on. It was Spotify or something. All these tracks coming through. A lot of them were live tracks, I think, probably because of licensing live tracks. And there were songs that I'd never heard before. But again, the engagement he had, this commentary on the culture, I thought, this is fantastic. And I would just love there to be, Christian artists to engage like that. Still, whether they'd be allowed to engage like that is another matter. I don't know. maybe they'd be shut down pretty quickly and cancelled. But yes, praising and worshipping God is great, but we also need to reach out across as well as up, to our fellow humans.
So I'm hearing a few things from you. I'm hearing stance, right? That happened in the education. Yeah. For example, that student who said, well, I'm not good at fill in the blank. They're declaring a belief in their nature. I am the way that I am. And you're suggesting to that student, well, think about it a different way. Take a different stance. And I hear the same thing in what you think about a Christian's relationship to culture, that I think in both cases there's an implied separation. And you're suggesting, well, what if there are ways across that bridge? Now, before we get too far, let's get an introduction.
Oh, okay. It's like one of these films where they James Bond films always started with an action sequence.
Exactly.
And then they'd have the credit. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here.
So the best is probably gone now.
No, I'm optimistic. Speaking of James Bond, I just learned about Instagram taught me via a reel about the device that makes his name memorable.
Right.
The repetition Bond. James Bond,
right?
Which is the same device as to be or not to be.
Okay.
Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? To say a thing twice, separated by a little bit, just burrows into our mind. So your name is Stokes.
That's right. Yeah,
Richard Stokes.
That is correct. Yes, I don't have a great affinity with it because Stokes is not my father's name, so we don't know who my father's father was. So, so it's the name I go by. I never liked the name Richard. particularly as a teacher, because Richard means strong ruler, and I didn't feel like I was a strong ruler in the class, although I got a reputation for that, but that was more about self-protection most of the time. Well, I think when I was growing up, I wanted to be called Roger, because there was an English writer called Arthur Ransom. He was an extraordinary fellow, and he wrote these books for children, Swallows and Amazons, and they will be a couple of families, and they would usually have adventures around waters and on lakes and things, sailing dinghies and things like that. And Roger was the young one who was always getting into a bit of a mess or picking things up he shouldn't. And that was me. I was that kind of guy. I was always
you related to that,
or treading in things I shouldn't. that kind of thing. Yeah. So Arthur Ransom's worth looking into, because he was also a spy in Russia. So he was a British spy in Russia, and he had to get
this author.
Well, he became an author afterwards, and this is another thing. I mean, you were mentioning about seeing yourself as a teacher, maybe rather than a sculptor, but we can do, we can wear several hats. So Ransom, so he was a spy for the British in Russia at the time of the revolution. So he had to get in the midst of things, and he ended up getting into the midst of things by being the boyfriend of Lenin's secretary.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he managed that quite successfully, and he managed to then extract himself from Russia and make his reports. And then they said, "Okay, we want you to go back." and he had the First World War was going on, and he walked across the war between the Russians and the Germans. He walked across that border into the hands of the Russians, even though he'd extracted himself previously to resume his spying. I mean, he was quite an extraordinary fellow. No wonder he decided to spend the rest of his life up in the Lake District writing stories for children.
I think what's embedded there is that a person is a complicated thing. A life is a complicated thing.
And there's more to us. We shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves, because God puts in us all manner of things. And if you're struggling with an aspect of what you're doing, maybe it's because God wants you to also be doing something else, or doing something else instead, or...
Take a hint. Well, okay, so far our listeners have a name.
Okay.
About you. Could you give us a little bit of dust jacket overview? Who is this guy?
Oh.
Like long view. They've already detected your accent. How do we get to know you quickly, and what are you doing here?
Right, so to start with the end bit first, because I'm getting on a bit, so my memory fades. So I'm over here because I married an American lady who was living over here, who is living over here. And it's extraordinary that I came here, because I'm English, and I hadn't flown for over 20 years, and I wasn't planning to go anywhere. If I was going to go anywhere, it would be back to Italy, because I love Italy. But to come over here, it's been a breath of fresh air. It's been an extraordinary experience. I've loved it. I love Minnesota, and also I've always thrown a word for Iowa as well. But and the people, the small towns. I love the small towns. I know they're all struggling, but it's just wonderful to be in such a setting, really, with such people, and a place like Bethany. I think I said to you fairly earlier, I was so excited to come to a place where there are so many Christians working creatively together and studying together, and I would liken it to like Shakespearean England. I mean Mankato. I don't know what the population is of Mankato, but if you think of Shakespeare's London, it wouldn't have been vastly bigger, and yet there was a lot of creativity going on there. You don't need to be in New York or San Francisco or London or Milan or anywhere to be in the midst of things. And I think as Christians we're probably called to be countercultural anyway, but I think what is here in Bethany is very, very special. And as I said to you earlier, just to be in the chapel and hear all those young voices is wonderful. And I said I hadn't heard that since I was at school. I got a scholarship to go to an all-boys school, private school, paid for by the state, which was very decent of them. And they would have chapel, and I would go there. I wasn't a believer in anything. I was not from a non-Christian background. But the singing was fantastic in that chapel. And it was a culture of singing in, boys, men, and people who didn't believe anything would sing their hearts out, and they would be singing Christian hymns. And I don't know what impact it had on me as in terms of me coming to faith later, but I thought in terms of who these people were as individuals, that they would sing with their whole hearts. Those who had thought about it and weren't Christians or decided they were atheists, they just didn't sing at all, but the rest would be belting this stuff out. And I always remember that later because I taught in a state school, so part of the biography I was a teacher. I taught in a state school, and we had an assembly at the beginning of the year, and there were 600 odd children in a hall, and they played, I'll call it a hymn, but it was about like fluffy cabbages and things rather than anything to do with God. But literally, fluffy cabbages, I think, was mentioned. But the hymn began, so I started to sing, and then I noticed that all these children turned to face me because my voice was about the only thing you would hear. And I was shocked. It wasn't something I was expected or knew or had experienced before, where it was almost like the spirits of all these children were depressed, and they couldn't even sing. It would be like a murmur. You'd hear the piano and a murmur. It was awful. So I became known very quickly in that school because I was the guy who made a noise. So.
By that time, would you have considered yourself a Christian?
Yeah, so I became Christian when I was 21. It was a long process, so maybe if you wanted to get into that. So
actually, yes.
Oh, do you? All right.
Yeah, I mean, you relayed this sequence to me before. We were sitting in Jenna's office.
Yeah.
Many of our readers will be aware of Jenna's office, and
it's a good place.
It's a good place.
Yeah.
I hope that we can hear that here on the microphone.
Okay.
That experience.
Yeah. So I was very happy as a child. Life was great, and I got this scholarship to go to this all-boys school, and I think we might have talked about expectations. So having been coasting in a state school where I suddenly was in a school where there was far more academic challenge, and I had to work a lot. So that sort of shut me up a bit. And it was also quite sad from an artistic point of view because I used to draw and paint a lot. I mean, when I was, I'm going to try and work this out, I was going to say 10, but might have been 8 or 9. My teacher thought I was so good at art that I didn't have to do maths, because we would be in the class and she would give me painting. I can still remember painting portraits of King Charles I and Oliver Cromwell for a display and things like that in the maths lesson, which is great. And I
just want to cut in because when I was in grade school, I had a teacher, and I did an interview with her recently, my first grade teacher, who had a similar thought about me. And we had a program where I was pulled out of class and taken down the hall to a gifted student program where the student could kind of determine what they want to spend time learning more about. And then they would find a tutor from the college up the hill, Martin Luther College, to support that student's interest. And I chose art over and over. So there's a parallel there.
Well, children self-educating is probably, like asking the questions.
The engagement there is built in.
Yeah,
There's this
if
idea.
if you don't find it on the curriculum, find it yourself.
Whose education is it?
Sorry to the authorities, but it's always interesting to read biographies of famous men and women, Edison or whoever, and so many were home educated, self-taught, rather than following the curriculum. In fact, that school I was talking about, the boys' school, I realised too late that if I wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge, I should have been reading outside of what the school was telling me to do. That was the secret.
The minimum wasn't going to do it.
No, well, to me it didn't appear like the minimum, but I just needed to be reading more widely and following my interests. Follow your interests, for sure.
That's an important thing for our listeners to digest.
Yeah, and to know that your approach, who you are, is how God made you to be, and I don't know whether it's still true now, but I know later in my teaching career with maths, they would do division a different way or some other thing to a way I'd done it in my youth, and you get people being students being told by the teachers, you have to do it this way, when actually they've been doing it that way. Well, if you get the right answer, and why do you have to do it in a set way?
That's more about compliance.
It is
than the result.
Well, it is, yeah.
Okay, so you're in the middle of a very important story.
Oh, right, yeah. So my middle name should have been Digression, shouldn't it? And
take us back to
I'm in this
young man.
school. So the artistic side of me had been dampened down, and that turned me more inward. So I started writing poetry probably, and I did.
No, wait a minute. You jumped. So dampened down. I was hearing.
Well, that was because of the arts. So I went to this more academic school, and so I wasn't painting. I wasn't drawing.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had this picture of you earlier in life where you were very interested in painting and drawing.
Yeah. Very happy. Animals.
And then you moved to a different school that had more. You said rigor, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Although they also had more sport. I mean, it was fascinating. So it was a 6-day-a-week school because it was a boarding school. And I'd find myself in a double chemistry lesson on a Saturday morning. And how cool was that? I mean, the chemistry laboratory was extraordinary. It's sort of dark and with fume cupboards and...
You loved it.
Well, I loved the concept of just being there. I wouldn't say I was a great chemist.
It was like being on the set of a mad scientist movie or something.
Absolutely, yes. And apparently one of the previous chemists at the school had his own distillery up in the roof space. Anyway, by the way, but there was a lot of sport there. So it was a 6-day-a-week school because they had to keep the boarders occupied. But Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday afternoons were sport. So you
had to keep them occupied. There's a statement there.
Yes, and then the Wednesday afternoons were activities, and so those were good things. I mean, I loved the sport. I mean, broke all the bones in my fingers and toes, but I loved all the sport, and the Wednesday afternoon activity. The Wednesday afternoon activities, because they would have like military, cadet things. So you all had to join the cadets. So I was in the RAF cadets to begin with until I was thrown out.
Royal Air Force cadets.
Yeah, that's right. I was thrown out of the cadets for fighting. I mean, how ironic is that? To be thrown out of a cadet force for fighting.
No, that is interesting. I thought that's what we were here for.
Yeah, but after that, so I then went into what the students would call granny bashing, but was basically like social activities, helping, and I met some extraordinary people, elderly people, and you would help them with household tasks or whatever. I mean, there was
what a name, granny bashing.
Granny bashing, yeah. But yeah, so I remember going to this house. It was a big old house wood panelling. And this elderly lady lived in it by herself, and she had a kitchen on the first floor, so she'd abandoned the ground floor. Oh, well, you call the ground floor the first floor in America, seemingly.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. All right, so she had a kitchen on the second floor. She'd abandoned the first floor, and the kitchen was filthy. So the first time I went to see her, I cleaned the kitchen floor. And it was literally scraping off all the mud, because she would spill stuff when she was cooking. So I cleaned this. I was very proud of myself. And I thought, great. And I cleaned it because it was caked on. I thought, well, that's a job well done. I went back the next week, and the floor was exactly the same.
Oh no!
So I cleaned the kitchen floor again, and that was. But she had been a war hero. She'd been a nurse in London during the war. And when the hospital was bombed to pieces, she'd continue to, pull people out of the rubble and nurse them. And she had these medals for her bravery. And and here she was, in some, almost forgotten, overgrown garden, dark, rotting house. So anyway, so it was an interesting school. But then when I was 14, had an occurrence at my home. So my father had been a jeweler. Well, he would sell jewellery. So he was what we call a rep. He would travel around selling to the jewellers' shops. And we'd known that some criminals had got hold of a list of reps, jewellery reps, and they were very logically working their way down the list. So they would do raids, usually at home, the home raids on the reps. And they'd done various nasty things, split a guy's head open, stuff like that. And so, very exciting, as a school child, is that I suddenly was surrounded by armed police. So the police followed my father around because they'd had a tip off that he was next on the list. And we had 24-hour coverage for armed police. Very unusual in England in those days, but these were they were called the Flying Squad, so they were top of the range police. And so back to chemistry, I can remember being at the dining table doing my chemistry homework alongside these police officers who were all wearing their plainclothes stuff because they were there all the time, and they would play these endless card games that would last like 3 days. Because stake out, what else do you do? But they would have their guns on the table, and but one of them was a chemistry graduate, and so he helped me with my chemistry homework. And I've been told I was due to fail my chemistry exams, but I passed, and I could give this guy full credit. But they said to me, look, if they come through, they'll probably come through the French windows, the glass doors. They'll probably come through those. And if they come through there, you just drop to the floor and we'll deal with what's going to go on. So that was all very exciting. But on a 24-hour stakeout like that, they're rotating every 8 hours. So you're looking at, 32 officers or something involved. And they couldn't sustain that level. So after 2 weeks, they had to give it up. And they think because they were taking photographs of cars that passed, suspicious vehicles and things, and they took a photograph of a van, and they were at a distance, and they think that it had been hired in London, but they didn't, but they think that they'd been casing the joint, as we would say. And
just for context, do you have a year or a range of years that we can picture this in?
So we're talking late 1970s.
Late 70s.
Yeah, late 70s, yeah. And so they think that they were scared off, because you see these police officers trooping in and out of the house, even if they're in civilian clothes. It's
they figured that out.
Yeah, they've figured that out. Yeah. So the police went away. That would have been in November, and then one February evening, I think it was February the 13th, one dark evening, my mother and I were in the house. My father had taken my elder brother to the pictures to see was it James Bond film? It might have been Clint Eastwood. Anyway, there was a big bang I was doing my homework. See how conscientious I was. I was doing my homework, and there was this big bang, and we'd had a builder in doing some work in the house, and the first thought is, a ladder's fallen over or something. We had a solid wood front door, which was a security door with deadlocks on it. And later, when the police had a look at that, there was one footprint on it. It was kicked off its hinges by one. And so there you go. But they came in wearing balaclava helmets, demanding to know where the jewellery was. And so we went through that. They didn't harm me physically. My mother and I. Well, it was interesting because the door was open to the kitchen from the dining room where I was doing my homework, and I'd looked through the door, and my mother was hanging up washing in the kitchen, to dry on an airer. And I looked at her, and it was like one of those cartoon scenes where you see the colour drain out of the face. It just drops out, and that's literally what happened because she looked towards the kitchen door. And this guy came through with his balaclava, and I just saw the colour. So I went to her.
So you're seeing her, but you're not seeing them?
Not at that point, no.
She's seeing them.
So I went to her to catch her because she was about to faint. So then I was just holding her for the rest of the time, and they were asking. And we had a safe.
How old are you? 14?
I'm 14.
14.
Yeah. And So there's a guy with a big lump of wood, so a wooden stave. He just holds us in the corner while they're asking us questions. And where's the stuff? Where's the stuff? And we presumed it was in the safe because we had a very large safe, which was located in the kitchen, and specially built cabinet. And had it been in there, we'd have been in trouble because we didn't have the wherewithal to open it. But it wasn't. My father had been cleaning the jewellery and so on, and then he'd just push the bags that he would take around with him under the bed in my parents' bedroom, and then gone to the cinema. And they ransacked the house and they found the bags, and then they scarpered. And
so your dad's at the movies?
He's at the movies, and he was summoned from the movies. It was great. So I think Clint Eastwood said something like, "What do we do now?" And this message came up on the screen. Will Harry Stokes please report to the reception? And I always remember his arrival back home. My father was 6 foot. He was taller than me. He was 6 foot tall. And he stepped into the house, and within 5 seconds there were 4 policemen standing around him who all towered over him, asking him questions, because their first suspicion is inside job.
Oh, wow.
Put him under pressure.
Wow.
Yeah. And so anyway, we went through that. And I remember giving my statement to the police at the time, and they said, were you scared? No, I wasn't scared, because you're in the moment, aren't you? You're adrenaline, you're in the moment. But afterwards, which is too late for the statement, afterwards, the fear sets in, and it's totally irrational. So, that night, went to bed, left the lights on. The police had thoughtfully propped the door in its space, because it had been kicked off the hinges. They propped it up with rocks to keep. So we had a front door, and they said we'll leave a car outside the house. But we had all the lights on in the house, and I went to bed. And then we had a power cut in the middle of the night, and I thought they're coming back to kill us. and I became a control freak. So, I would always check locks and things. If I came back from school before anyone else, I couldn't go into the house because I just thought someone would come in and kill me. It was totally irrational, and I just couldn't deal with it. And I was, when I went up to a university in London, I was pretty suicidal. But it caused me to start asking questions.
So February 13th was a pivot in your life.
For sure, yeah.
There's before and there's after.
Yeah. I started asking questions, and you realise that reality isn't what you thought it was. So, for instance, you think about the law, the law of the land. The law does not protect anybody. Only belief in the law protects people. The law only comes into effect after it's broken. And so later on, in the UK, the government decided to remove the police from the streets because they thought, well, it's no good these police wandering around on the streets, in public. We need them in cars ready to go and do stuff. But what they did was they removed the physical evidence of law and order. They removed that. So now the streets belong to the criminals. And they just undermined the rule of law in the UK by that policy. Because unless there's
now
faith in the law...
Now you're talking about something very broad.
Yeah.
You're not talking about your house or your neighborhood.
No.
It's the belief in the law.
But you start thinking, so that's how I saw things. But my biggest problem was trust after that. Because I couldn't trust my parents. They hadn't kept me safe. We had this experience in the home. Who could you trust? You couldn't trust the government, obviously. You couldn't trust anybody. And
so suddenly you realized, or you saw yourself as all alone.
Yeah, and I couldn't trust myself because these thoughts and feelings I had were totally irrational, so I couldn't trust myself. And I hated that. And you couldn't escape your own thoughts. You were trapped by your own thoughts.
You didn't want to have them, but they were happening.
So you were tormented. And when people talk about what hell is like, I can imagine the torment of your own thoughts in isolation. That is, for me, that's hell. And there was no escape from that. There's no escape. And that changed, and hope arose one afternoon. I was still at school. This would have been less than a year later. I had a study period, which I would use for study. We were in cubicles, so you had like wooden-sided boxes. You would be in your cubicle. But the guy in the next cubicle leaned back in his chair so he could peer around the partition and just started chatting to me. And it was an offer of friendship. And, it was quite a surprise for someone to just offer friendship like that. It was,
Do you remember his name?
Oh, yeah, well, very much so. His name is Matthew Peacock. He's a multimillionaire now. You can probably look him up on Wikipedia, things like that. But he offered friendship to me, and I've never forgotten that offer of friendship. And he was Christian, from a Christian family. And I would say he and his family were the first Christians I ever met. He invited me to his home, and I remember the first time I went to his house, which was a beautiful old house in a little town called Ampthill in Bedfordshire. And it was an old rambling house, and I absolutely loved it. But I went there, and there was a little old fellow visiting them. And this is my first visit, and this little old fellow tells me his life after death experience. I think, who are these people? And they were talking about Jesus, and it's like, okay, Jesus has just popped out the door. He's part of the family. This was amazing to me, and that set me aflame. I wanted what they had. That's the long and the short of it. I wanted what they had.
Based on their demonstrated life, based on the stance that you detected, maybe in the same way that we started talking about students sensing the expectations of the teacher and mirroring it. This is nonverbal communication, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, they were just being who they were.
Yeah.
And that was extraordinary to me. I mean, I went on holiday with them as a family. So there was mum, dad, 3 kids. And I went on holiday. So you're in the same car together. And they are a normal family. Dad tells off Matthew or whoever. There would be things like that. But there was a quality to their life that I'd never encountered before. And I can only put that down to Jesus and the relationship they had with him. They knew he was real, and it made a difference to who they were. The light shines, and I wanted that. But I had a problem because I couldn't trust. And
inside of you was very dark.
Yes, that's right. And so time moved on. And I went to university. I found university a complete waste of time. So I went to university. I went to London and I went to the East End of London, to Queen Mary College, in the East End of London, because that was the nearest I could get to the football team I supported. And I went to study history because I'd really enjoyed history.
Name the team. Who's the team?
So that's West Ham United. So as a 3-month-old child, I was taken along to see West Ham bring home the FA Cup. And they haven't done much since then. But in 1966, when England won the World Cup, 3 of the players were from West Ham, and 2 of them scored the England goals. By the way,
formative memories.
Well, sport is interesting. Sport was a huge thing for me, and later I would reflect on that. That it was too big a thing. That I would follow, look at the football results, and if West Ham had lost on the Saturday afternoon, my weekend was ruined. I'd be in a bad mood, and it was crazy. I loved playing sport. I was a great fan of playing sport.
You've said this a few times. Can you just tell us what sport or sports?
Well, I suppose I experienced the most success in what you would call soccer, but pretty much anything. I didn't play much cricket at school because...
I bring it up because pretty much anything, I think, means something else.
Okay.
Here.
Right.
We've got a different sort of canon.
Yeah. So I didn't play cricket at school. I love cricket now, but because I was in the rowing club, so I would row. But I was a bit lightweight, so they were looking at me as the Cox, the guy at the back, and then I became too big for a Cox, so they made me the bowman, the guy at the end of the boat, lightweight, and and I was pretty lousy at rowing. But I would play anything, so lacrosse. One of my favourite all-time games that I encountered at that school was a game called Fives, which you wear gloves, and it's a small hard ball, so it's like a squash court, and you just whack this ball around, and you can play it off all 4 sides, and there's a bar at the end which sounds if the ball hits it, and then obviously if the ball goes beneath it. But it's a fantastic game, and it's like squash, but without the injuries. Because in squash, people get hit with the rackets and things. But in squash, you've got that extra reach, haven't you? Because you've got the stick on the end of your hand. Well, in Fives, you've got to get there with your hand.
Yeah.
So it's very intense.
It sounds explosive. Like you really got to go.
And I later on, I taught and I introduced some kids to Fives, and they were fantastic. It's great.
Okay, Queen Mary College.
Yeah, so Queen Mary, and it was a huge disappointment. So I started, I'd gone to study history because I'd loved history at school. I had really weird history teachers, which probably, made me love it even more. I mean, one of them put an ice pick into his desk one time in a lesson to demonstrate something. They do all sorts of things. Teachers can be very important people in your life, So I went to study history, and history at university was dull as dull can be. One of my teachers was the historian for the Conservative Party in England, and no, I didn't get much of that. So I transferred to English. I had this great interview to transfer. So there was this alcoholic Scotsman who was in charge of the English department, and my interview went along the lines of, you better be effing good at this. And I said, I will be effing good. He said, okay, you're in. That was the extent of the interview. But again, it was a waste of time. I went to lectures and they would say, okay, well, this is a lecture on Dickens. And they would just tell you the plot. And you think, well, what's the point of that? What is the point? There was no expectation that you would read a novel, read a poem, watch a play. Nothing. It was all about reading what other people said about these things. So you could get an English degree without reading any of those things. You would just read the critical papers on them. And I just got very irritated and I disengaged by it. I remember I wrote an essay on Ibsen. And I read these Ibsen plays. And I got very excited because Ibsen's early work were Peer Gynt and Brand. And they're very exciting and dramatic. And then he turns to his psychological dramas. And I'm thinking, what in the world happened to him? And I found that after Peer Gynt and Brand, he was hammered by the critics. And so he changed his style. And I wrote an essay on this and I got an F for it.
The essay was about his change?
Yes, that's right. And so I was fairly derogatory about his later works. And the chap marking the paper was a big fan of Ibsen and was not at all pleased with what I'd written, and he gave me an F for it. And
so you think the grade is a statement of how much how aligned you were in your stance?
I don't know. Perhaps I deserved it, but I didn't care. I stopped going to lectures. I stopped going to anything, and then I decided
you're getting pretty sour.
Absolutely. And I decided to leave. And then they said, well, you'll have to pay back your tuition fees. So I said, all right, I'll stay to the end of the year and take the end of year exams. And I took the end of year exams. I didn't revise, didn't do anything, and I did really well in the end of year exams. I thought, well, whatever, maybe I'll go back another time. But the reason why I chose to leave was I'd come to the end of myself, and the moment for that was, so I'd been a good boy. So my family were from London, and we moved out to a place called Bedford, 50 miles north of London. But we used to always travel back to London because the family were there, and there'd be family parties and so London was home. And so when I went up to university, I would go and visit my grandmother in North London, Edmonton. And I would go and see her on a Friday night. So here's student boy, student life, London. Friday night, what's he doing? He's going to see Granny.
Granny bashing.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I would go and see my grandmother.
Yeah.
And here it comes. So she would talk to me. She would open up and talk to me. Usually I'd arrive. She'd cook me a meal. We'd watch Sherlock Holmes or something together. And then she'd start talking. And she would talk about her loneliness. And I would give her a pep talk. And one of the things I would say to her is that you can always talk to God. You can always talk to God. Talk to Jesus. Because remember, I've associated with these Christian people, and I'm not a Christian myself.
But you wanted to help your grandmother some way.
Yeah. And anyway, I could sit next to her and I could hear her lungs bubbling because she'd been a lifelong smoker. And one time we got a call that she was in hospital, and what had happened was, what the story goes, so she'd broken her hip. But basically she'd broken her hip, she'd had a fall on a bus in London, and the whole story came out that she was riddled with cancer, and she would spend her days riding on buses round and round London because she was so lonely.
Just to be with people.
Well, just to be out of the house and then silence.
It's better than nothing.
And I felt like something you might tread in, on a poorly lit street or something. And I was devastated. I felt miserable because here I boosted myself up to be something, and to tell her how she could handle her life and everything. And yet she'd been keeping from me that she was dying. And I'd be given and my words were just so empty.
So you had this stark realization that
I was.
You pictured yourself in a certain stance, like a certain way, like maybe you're better than college.
Oh yeah, well yeah, what a good boy I was, and that was it for me.
Reality revealed itself.
Yeah, I was done. I was done. I thought.
And you said earlier you came to the end of yourself.
Absolutely, and so. Yeah, so I'd leave university, and I remember phoning my parents to let them know I was coming home, and my parents just did not understand because I told them nothing. I told them not, and there are other sides to this. So, for instance, I'd got to know some guys in college, a few guys there, and they were doing drugs and things, and and they thought I was great because I would be going or following up with these ideas. And I even talked about Jesus with them too, because I didn't care. And they seemed to think I was really interesting. So I thought, oh, that's me, what a great guy I am. And then one of those took a leap out of the 10th floor of a building under the influence. He was a mathematician who supported Chelsea Football Club. And it was just so meaningless, empty. And I just thought, I'm just going to go home and I'm going to get a job and just be or do something. I don't know. I mean, I had tried to go to the River Thames and stare into the water, but I was too scared to jump in, But so I went home and
Right now, you're describing an accumulation of experiences that are under the thesis, I found the end of myself.
Yeah. So I went home, and so we're then a few months in, and I had a phone call from this friend Matthew. Now his father, perhaps it's worth mentioning that this Christian guy, he was not an idiot. He was a professor of aeronautical aerodynamics, or whatever it was, who held the academic seat in Pisa University that had been once held by Galileo.
Pisa, Italy.
Yeah, he had the American Air Force and the American Navy had fought over his services and compromised by giving him 2 research establishments so that he could do that. He was a top flight.
This is the father of your friend Matthew.
That's right. So he was over in America. The family had gone over to America, and because of his work, and Matthew was in university in London, same as me, but he had a job. He had a hotel in London. And so their home in Ampthill, with this big old rambling house, which I loved, there was a housekeeper looking after it. And so she was looking after the dog, the Dalmatian dog. They had a cat, they had a hamster, they had fish, all these sort of various menagerie. And the housekeeper's husband died just before Christmas. And so she obviously was not available. So they were looking for someone to care for the animals until they were due to come back for Christmas. And they contacted me, and I said, yeah, I will go there, and I will go there and stay. And so I went, and it was extraordinary. So I remember I am the control freak when it came to personal security, that I would double check locks and things. This house had no personal security whatsoever. I mean, you had a big heavy iron key to open the front door from the street, and you walked into this old wooden hall, and you had to walk through in the dark because there was no light switch in that hall, big open hall reception area. You had to walk through into a passage toward the back of the house to turn on a light, and the back door had no locks on it.
All of this is driving you crazy.
But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. So, one part of my brain was saying, whoa. The other part said, this is fine, because there was Spirit of God hovering. There was a peace upon that house. I slept soundly there. It was fine. So then I was there a week, and I only spoke to one person in that week. And I went and bought a pint of milk, and I said thank you to the person serving me. And that's the only time I spoke. But each day I was out. I would take the Dalmatian dog for a walk and have the occasional crisis. So one time I came down in the morning and I opened the kitchen door. They had an Aga boiler, so it was always nice and warm in the kitchen. And I opened the kitchen door, and I saw that the dog was not in his basket. In the basket was the hamster cage. And I thought, this isn't good. So the dog was over to one side, and then I started to look for the cat, and the cat is peering intently beneath the a kitchen unit. So basically, the cat had gone up onto there was a mantle over the Aga, had gone on over the
auger,
the AGA. So Agas, they're like
Aga.
Yeah, they're these. What would you call these kitchen stove? The old kitchen stoves. They could be wood fired or
okay.
But they've got hot plates and all that kind of stuff, and you can keep them going all the time. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So there'd been this dramatic encounter between these 3 animals, but the hamster was fine, so I was very relieved because.
So the hamster cage ended up in the dog bed because of
the cat had attacked the cage to try and get at the hamster,
tumbled it around.
It got into the dog basket, and the hamster had escaped.
Oh no!
Yeah, underneath the unit, but I managed to recapture the hamster.
Okay.
Thwart the cat.
So good morning.
And the dog was okay. Yeah, so it was a good one. But anyway, I digress. But on a table there'd been a book, a Christian book, and it was an biography called Bursting the Wineskins by a fellow called Cassidy, I think his name was. And he'd had all these Christian experiences and so on. And I read it while I was there. And I thought, okay, well, this guy has got no reason to lie. And I know these people, but that's not me. That's not me. The end of the week came, and I took a bus home back to Bedford. And it was the weather had turned. It had been lovely out. I'd gone out in the beautiful parkland around Ampthill, and I'd walked the dog around there, and it had been very mild and not like Minnesota winters. And the squirrels had been out collecting nuts and things. And I'd picked up this beech tree seed and put it in my pocket and think, oh, well, I'll plant that rather than let the squirrels eat it. I'll plant that. Anyway, I'd headed home, and I was walking from town to my parents' house, and I had this duffel coat, and I had my hands going through in the pockets, and I was going through all the sweet wrappers and fluff and things, and I thought, oh, what's this? And I took this seed out of my pocket. I'd forgotten all about it.
So time has passed.
Yeah, well, it was the week. It was literally gone home after the family had the Peacock.
You're no
family
longer at the housekeeping.
And I was back in Bedford. Yes, I'd just on the return journey, and that's when I felt God speak to me. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was as clear as anything. I was holding this seed in my hand, and I looked at it, and these words came that had been in the book. Unless a seed fall into the ground and die, it cannot live. And I realized, in the same moment, I realized that God had given me my life as a seed. And I had that seed, and I'd clamped a fist round it because I wanted to protect it and hold on to it. And I suddenly realized that I would never live if I did that. I had to let go. I had to open my hand and let the seed fall into the ground and die, that it might grow and produce fruit.
Because that's the nature of a seed.
That's the nature of the seed, and that is our nature, that we have to die to self. And I realized that I needed to trust, to let go of that protective instinct, and I had to trust, and God was saying, trust me.
Whoever would save his life would lose it.
Yeah, and so I think my audible response at that moment was, yep, which was probably theologically wasn't probably the best response, but it was
a confession.
Coming into agreement with
like
God.
A creed.
Coming into agreement with God.
That's so delightful, Richard. Yep.
About who I was, who he was, what he had done for me.
That's a variation of "Here I am, send me."
Yeah. And my life changed from that moment.
So here's another fulcrum moment. Like you described February 13th in great detail. You just described the hand in your pocket in great detail. Just set the scene again. Like, do you remember what's around you?
Absolutely. So I could take you to the corner in Bedford where I was when I took the seed out of my pocket.
We'll try to do that right now.
Okay. So there's a main road out that goes out from Bedford town centre. So the town centre would go back to prehistory. But one of the wonderful things, I never used to like Bedford until I went to London. But then when I came back to Bedford, I realised you could walk everywhere. And so I was walking, the bus station was in the town centre. So I was walking from the bus station, and you walk up a road called the Kimbolton Road, which is the main road that goes from Bedford to Kimbolton. When we say main road, we mean like a track. you go out and it zigzags around because the road still follows boundaries from the 10th and 11th century farmland and things like that. So we have like 90-degree bends on it, literally 90-degree bends where you have to slow down to 5 miles an hour. And but that's the Kimbolton Road. And so I was walking up the Kimbolton Road, and then there was a turn up to Putney Lane. So on the corner there's a bungalow to the right. So it was dark, it was wet, with a drizzly rain. It was fairly misty, drizzly rain as well. A bit chillier, as I say, the weather had turned. and because we're in December, and so there was no one else around. Roads were pretty quiet, and there's this going through, the contents of the pocket, and there's a seed, small dark brown seed. And
you're a little chilly, damp.
Yeah. I still have the duffel coat, which was grey. It is grey.
And can you describe you? So I as I understand it, you're in your head, right? Your state of mind is you're contemplating, you're mulling things over. Is there a way to describe your mood?
Well, I don't think. I mean, that was the interesting thing. So I had been unable to trust my emotions. So I'd been with this family because of this family. I'd been in Christian meetings, and I probably missed out a big chunk of the story, which was that before I left London, I went to a church meeting, a big London central London church called All Souls in Langham Place, Anglican church, because there was an American evangelist was speaking there, and I'd heard of this guy, and I thought, oh, that's interesting to hear an American evangelist. And his name, you may have heard of, was a fellow called Billy Graham.
Oh, yes.
And I arranged to meet this fellow Matthew there, and I was there very early because I wanted to get a seat, and Matthew was there very late because he was Matthew, and so I thought all the seats are gone here because I don't know how many people it would seat, maybe 500 or so. But we went to the door when he arrived, and they said, "Oh, I think there's just some space at the front there." I would have gone and sat up far away. I ended up sitting on the steps that led up to the dais, and I sat under Billy Graham's nose.
You're right there.
And they started off the church leader, Richard Buse, interviewed Billy Graham, and he was exactly what I expected, this big, brash American televangelist. And I thought, oh yeah, this is what I expected. And then when he began to preach, that man seemed to disappear, and all you heard was Scripture and God speaking. Well, not God, but the personality was gone, and he gave an appeal at the end for people who wanted to be sure of God, and I desperately wanted to be sure of God, but I felt my emotions rising, so I was clamping down with everything I had, and I'm under his Billy Graham's nose. Remember,
you don't trust your emotions.
No, and I was resisting, and he said, "I'll wait. I'll wait a bit longer." And I'm thinking, I can't respond to this. And he said, "I'll wait a bit longer." And I said, I was saying, "I can't respond to this." And he said, "I'll wait a bit longer." And I think, oh, I just need to get out of here. So I raised my hand and responded to the call, as it were. And
wait, set that stage again. I'm not sure about.
Yeah, so I'm in a church meeting.
A little bit longer.
So this is before the incident in Ampthill, and the message had been, I don't remember too much about the appeal at the end, wanting to be sure of God. But because my emotions were stirred, I could not trust my emotions. I could not trust my thoughts. I couldn't trust any people. And so I would never make a decision based on my emotional response. That was how I was. And yet I was desperate to get out of that situation. So I raised my hand. And as soon as the service concluded, I was out of that building and renouncing what I had done. That doesn't count. That's an emotive response. I'm not, it's nothing to do with me. But God had seen it. And the next event on the horizon is that time. And I've always said to people, I've encountered non-Christians I've encountered, I say to them, if you know where you are, God will meet you there. Most people don't know where they are. But God did it for me. And he gave me what I needed, which was a retreat. So he took me on the retreat. He put me in that house away from everybody, no emotion whatsoever involved. And, just peace, quiet, stillness, presence.
You needed no emotion to be involved.
That's right.
You needed to escape your overactive emotions.
I did. And God did that for me. He personalized a situation for me to bring me home.
Created circumstances.
Yeah. This morning I was reading about the prodigal son, and how the father runs to meet the prodigal. He also goes out to the other brother as well, doesn't he? He goes outside. And that struck me again deeply, that he goes out. And God did that for me. He came for me. And
that's the shepherd seeking the lost.
Oh, yeah, and the father. Yeah. And my father. And so he did what I needed. And he'll do that for other people, because I'm nothing special. He'll do that for anybody.
So I just want to reiterate or say again that statement, if you know where you are. Can you unfold that a little bit?
Well, I think you have to be honest about yourself. Lots of people, we wear different hats. I quite like the De Bono thinking hats. Do you know those, the De Bono thinking hats?
No.
There's like black hat thinking and blue hat thinking and white hat thinking.
No.
Oh, it's great. You get into it. It's a really, really good educational tool, actually, to help children think that there are different ways of approaching this. So I think like blue hat thinking, you don't push aside an idea just because you can immediately think of the problems with it. You just think, okay, this is a solution. This is a solution. It may not be the right solution, but you think of all the positive aspects of it. You can put the black hat on later, the critical, what's wrong with this solution? You can do that. So we had De Bono on his thinking hats, quite useful. And so I tend to think that in different situations, we are different people. So with my grandmother, I was giving her advice, and this is a drama thing, so I got into drama later on. You do status transactions. So someone says something, and so you adjust your status, and you can put your status higher than theirs by actually improving on what they've said. So in a lot of conversations, like at the moment, because I'm explaining something to you, I'm raising my status. It makes me feel good.
Sometimes people call this mansplaining.
Well, I don't think it's limited to men, I assure you.
No, but that has that idea, that implication that like, let me tell you how it is.
You can drive yourself...
The status of it.
You can drive yourself nuts if you're analysing status transactions too much. But
this is a new term for me, status transaction.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this.
Yeah, so it's a good drama thing. So drama comedy is status transactions. So I remember a classic example that was given. So there's a guy who's a guest who goes into a room and he sees the private correspondence mail post of his host on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. So he goes up to it and opens it and starts reading it.
He's opening somebody's mail. In comes the host. The host said, "What do you think you're doing?" So the status transaction there is, well, you could respond sort of aggressively to defensively, try and raise your status to fight back, so it becomes a battle. Or you can take your status down, say, "I'm opening your mail." And you're immediately beginning to diffuse the anger of the aggrieved host. They say, "Well, why are you doing that?" "Oh, I was interested to know what was in it." And it becomes quite comical. So and
you can have a lot of fun. If you're writing
escalate.
Scripts, if you want to be playwright, write scripts. Status transactions are great. Always make it about status transactions and conflict. Yeah.
Okay, but we're about knowing where you are.
Okay. Yes.
Right, and how this relates to let's say the prodigal, maybe.
Yeah, we don't see ourselves as we really are, and Scripture's very good at telling us who we are. Scriptures will tell us that actually...
In more than one way.
Yeah.
In a law way and in a gospel way.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And, if we're justifying ourselves, we're pretty good at justifying ourselves. And, in different situations, family conflicts, we can justify ourselves. And sometimes we don't see we're in the wrong for a long time. And we don't see who we are for a long time. And... that's not to say that I now know who I am, but I think we need to get to a certain point to say, okay, God, I need you in my life, because
at some
we're
point,
not designed to be alone.
Maybe the fantasy falls apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
About yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I came up with an image which I was using in a play I was working on, which this idea of the onion, that we're onions, and you can start peeling the layers of an onion, and we've got all these. And if you keep peeling the layers, because we're all these layers, you're going to end up with nothing. Okay. On the other hand, if you just let it be the onion that it is, it's a pretty solid thing. You can break windows with it. You can do anything. And there's some sense in which we need to hold, or God needs to hold us as the onion, rather than take ourselves apart, that we have to accept ourselves for who we are and then go to God and ask him to be involved in our lives, to bring the forgiveness we need, start his redemptive purposes in our lives, so that we don't peel the onion so there's nothing left.
And maybe plant it.
Well, yeah. Planting seeds, yeah. I've always been a big fan of gardening. Yeah, very therapeutic. Yeah, we need to be in touch with the soil. All of these things.
Yeah. I think you completed that story.
Good.
Right?
Sorry, that was a long version. I apologize. Yeah.
No, that's what we're here for. That story of let's say moving from dark into light. Yeah. Being rescued, and you have some very significant events in that story. Someday we'll watch the movie of your life, I think. And I appreciate here in the mics, at the microphones, and also in other settings. I appreciate that you share yourself. You mentioned theater, right? So I'm moving us to a different realm here, and I think it's related. I want to bring in your appreciation for Minnesota, and I think you already detect where I'm going. I think it's really interesting to think about how people romanticize something else. So the places that you're from, the places that you describe as mundane, everyday, sort of growing up, normal places, get romanticized by people around here. I remember Garrison Keillor once saying that, the only difference between central Minnesota and southern France is poetry. It's the amount of romanticizing that people have built up about a location. And so when he was doing his Prairie Home Companion radio show and his various books, he was kind of gifting that sort of lore to this place that you've come to and expressed an appreciation for. It's fascinating that it's hard for people to see their own context,
absolutely,
in a way that is, let's say, appreciative.
And I think it's a big problem for people in our age. I remember standing outside of one of the schools where I was teaching one time, and I was staying with a student, a younger student, and waiting for him to be collected by his parents. And it was summertime, and there were swifts and swallows flying around in the sky. And so I pointed up to these and said, well, do you know the difference between a swift and a swallow? This child did not know about swifts or swallows. I said, well, do you know the names of any birds? And I think he could name one or two. And it was a shock to me that they're just all birds. They're all trees. They're all flowers, not these particular trees, oaks and beeches and so on and so forth. And it's almost as if we're being cut off from the world around us. When I was teaching, I was always saying to the students, you need to identify what is under your feet, what is right about you now, rather than what's on TV and films and things. 'Cause, I mean, they'd love to tell me about films they'd seen and things like that. Well, what about the Square? The brilliant story I would share with them. So there's a lady in Birmingham is the second city of England. It's central England, and there's a lady who lives in Birmingham who is forgotten the word now. She's into insects and things. I've forgotten the word. Anyway,
is it
entomologist? Yeah,
entomologist.
But anyway, they've produced a book on her studies from her back garden. In her back garden, she discovered 2 new species of insect in her back garden in a city, because she looked at what was there. And I was thinking of Bethany and of you when I was not last in England. Or was it? Maybe it was the time before last. And I was in Oxford. I was in central Oxford. Now, Oxford, I did my teacher training in Oxford. It's a beautiful city, and I tend to favour it over Cambridge and more unspoilt areas and so on. But I was in Oxford, and all I could think of was that this is a tourist destination. It's a tourist. Presumably there is real studies and real things of interest and learning going on in different places, but primarily it was a tourist destination. It didn't have life in it that I saw, being on, just walking around the streets and things. In fact, some of the things that I knew had already disappeared. There was a beautiful old bookshop, and now it's turned into a mega store, bookstore. It's still called the same thing, but it's just deathly. And I'm sure it's far more efficient as a bookshop. Well, maybe not. But I was thinking of Bethany, while I was in Oxford, because I thought there was life at Bethany. There are these relationships at Bethany. There are real learning going on. There's creative endeavor going on. Jesus is honored in Bethany. All of these things were true of Bethany. And, where would I want my children to go if they were to learn and study? I would want them to go to Bethany, not to Oxford. That's what I felt when I was there. A bit like the Shakespeare in London and Mankato, I can walk in some parts of Mankato, and the Cultural War, is right there. So don't underestimate where you are.
Yeah.
Don't have your dreams somewhere else.
And I've been engaging that in sort of metaphorical ways. I'm trying to understand what's happening to the world, what's happening to thought. And in those searches, I've found Ian McGilchrist. You know that name?
I've heard of the name, yes.
He has 2 massive books. The most recent one's called "The Matter with Things," and that's a play on words, right? Because he's interested in the fascination with matter, the material world. And his earlier book is called "The Master and His Emissary," and that's a similar dichotomy, having to do with right brain, left brain, and let's say allegiances to interpretations of the way reality is. So the thing that you're saying about, let's say, the woman discovering bugs in her backyard, compared to say an allegiance to mediated information, right? He would say that's like the difference between insisting on what the map says or just looking around you.
Well,
right? Eyes down or eyes up.
Absolutely. Well, I've tried to refrain from sharing stories that crop up in the UK on a regular basis, which is Americans following sat navs in the UK, because they follow their they follow the GPS on their phones or whatever, and they end up wedged in between walls or in the middle of a ford or river ford and things like that, because they don't look at what's actually
That's
happening.
exactly it. And this is about your attention, right? Or your, I like allegiance. Is your allegiance, there's a funny show called The Office in which this is played out, right? There's this allegiance. And I like this as a picture, is your allegiance to the GPS or to the windshield?
Yeah. I'm a big fan, and I would say this to, when I was teaching. I would say because you get these texts of books, not always. I mean, I went to some schools, and I'd say, well, what novels are we studying or anything? And they say, well, we haven't got any novels. We've extracts. We deal with extracts. We don't have any books, or there might be some in that bottom cupboard somewhere, which was fairly scary. But I would say to children I was teaching when we had texts, I would say, if there's an introduction to the text, don't read it. You can read it at the end, but unless it's written by the author, don't read it. Because they want to give you a set view of it. Always go to first causes. Always go to the original documents, or go as far back as you can. I mean, that can be a bit laborious, but it's really interesting. So I remember when I was, I suppose I got this from this Professor Peacock. I'm not scared of knowledge. I'm not scared of, having my beliefs or faith undermined by anything that's out in the world. So, for instance, I'm very interested in evolution and creation and that things. So I read Darwin's works, and you find out, well, how did he work out things? So he was trying to work out what types of rocks there were in America, actually, I think. So what he did, he got a geological atlas and he cut it up, and he cut out all the different types of rocks, and then he weighed the pieces of paper to work out how much type of rock there were.
What?
It wasn't very scientific.
What?
I mean, most of his evolution...
He's weighing the pieces of paper?
Yeah, to work out the balance of the different...
the stone?
Yeah, that's right.
Come on. What?
But they talk about the importance of the Galapagos Islands for him. More important was his study of pigeons, because he bred pigeons and then he dissected them and so on, to develop his theory of evolution. And of course, that's all by selection, by human means. And so you go into these things and you find those things out. Dawkins, I've read Dawkins' books, and he wrote a book called was it The Greatest Show on Earth? I think it was the one where he says at the beginning that he's writing this book because there have been so many challenges to evolution. So it's time he wrote a book that put forward the proofs of evolution. So I think, how many books has this fellow written? And yet only now, on his 13th book, is he going to put forward the proofs for evolution. So, okay, I'll read this thing. And it's interesting reading, but one of the proofs he puts forward is a computer program that he wrote himself. And I think, this is a proof of evolution, a computer program that you wrote. And it becomes laughable.
Now I'm realizing that you brought this up right after our GPS versus windshield conversation.
Well, absolutely, because unless you're looking at identifying things for yourself, interacting with the world as it is, you can easily be misled. I mean, Dawkins, I used to think, oh well, he must be a very intelligent man. I remember one of the British papers called him like the greyhound of thinkers or something, because he was so sharp. And yet you find out that his chair at Oxford University was created for him. This rich fellow created this chair, which would pay him a lot of money, and his only job is to promote evolution. And he is actually a computer programmer. He's not a scientist. It's the emperor's new clothes all over again. But why should we be surprised? If the Bible is true, Jesus is God, we shouldn't be surprised by these things.
Your advocation for original sources reminds me of Martin Luther.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. And it's sometimes very hard to be the fish that turns the other way rather than all going the same way. I was fascinated one time. I was doing some tutoring at this country house, and it had its lakes and things, and there was like a river joining two lakes. And I was walking along by the river with my student, and I saw all this darkness in the water going against the flow, and they were tadpoles. Toads or frogs. Tadpoles. I'd never seen migratory tadpoles.
A cloud.
Yeah, but all flowing the same way. And you think, wow, that's what we experience. And I did read a study the other day that, in terms of trying to explain human behaviour, basically people will fit in with what they see, and therefore, if as long as the media continues to say the things it does and it's in agreement with itself, people will think that is what is right, that is what is true, and they will go along with that, which is fairly scary, because I find it very hard to find anything on the TV or whatever that's of value.
And to me, again, that's nonverbal communication. That's when you watch a murmuration of birds, it's very much like that tadpole migration. Yeah. You think about flocks and herds. What they do is they just their scope of attention is right next to them, and they will move left if the one next to them moves left, and then that has a compound effect, and this whole group is kind of like rippling its influence, small influence rippling large,
which is great for them, but maybe not for humans.
Well, I just observe it, Yeah. Like I see the nonverbalness, the unspoken rules of culture, that we just get it. You watch a group of people kind of know when it's time to stand up and walk away. Nobody says it, but somebody breaks rank. Somebody starts shifting in their chair a little bit, and then other people do it, and then one stands up, and suddenly everybody's up.
Yeah, in terms of mass psychology, possibly one of the most extraordinary experiences I had, I was at a football match at Wembley Stadium. It was a League Cup final between my team, West Ham, and Liverpool, Liverpool won everything in those days. And it was a dreadful game, terrible game. And towards the end of the game, like 5 minutes from the end, Liverpool scored a goal. But the linesman waved his flag that there was a problem with it, so he flagged for offside, and everything stopped. The referee went across to the linesman, the players were all gathering around, and then the referee awarded the goal. And I was at the opposite end of the pitch, so I couldn't really see what was going on, but you had this huge sense. I was in a crowd of, at that end there were maybe 25,000 people, who were big, all supporting West Ham. They were all the West Ham end.
All angry.
Yeah. And that's right, this sense of injustice. And it was extraordinary because West Ham kicked off after the goal had been awarded. And it was almost as if Liverpool, it was a dull game, but they were the better team, couldn't do anything to stop West Ham. So they would foul them, so there'd be a free kick, but West Ham would be moving forward. And it was the play came closer and closer to our end, to the Liverpool goal. And eventually there was a shot was taken, and one of the Liverpool players pushed the ball over the crossbar with his hand, so it was then a penalty. And, time's up, so it's going to be the last kick of the game. And it was bizarre. West Ham had a very good penalty taker called Ray Stewart, a Scotsman, and he would blast the ball into the net. He was renowned for it, so you think, oh, this is great. And he walked up to this ball and he side-footed the ball. The ball went so slowly, and he hit it with the side of the ball. But the goalkeeper was almost propelled across to the other post. But it was a sense the goalkeeper was propelled the other way by the crowd. It was almost like a mass psychological. Wow. It was really weird.
Wow.
Very strange. So the end of the game ended 1-1, and West Ham lost the replay. But it was a sense of everyone thinking the same way.
Yeah.
And having some sort of psychological effect.
And we're saying this because to be the one that goes against that stream is really difficult.
It is, yes. It's very powerful. I'm fascinated by all these different things that science does come across, like quantum entanglement. Do you know about quantum entanglement? So twins can be linked. So, so you have these twins interviewed and they were in a swimming pool in France, big municipal swimming pool, so very busy, and they're doing their own thing. And then one of them had a sudden sense that her twin sister was in trouble, and immediately was seeking her and found her on the bottom of the pool, and saved her life. And, there were lots of accounts in the First World War of people knowing when they were dead. But that's to do with, atoms. Once they're in relationship, I think they've tried this, haven't they, where they do experiments on atoms and they send things in different planes, but they can do an experiment on an atom part, whatever the bit is here, and it has an effect over there because there is some interrelationship that's never broken. I mean, I'm going off on one here, but I think you quoted Hamlet right at the beginning of this. Hamlet famously says, "There is more on heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy." And God is an eternal being, and He created everything, and so it doesn't surprise me that we don't know half of how things are.
And again, to me, that's the windshield versus the GPS. In this way, that if you believe in the map, right, what's implied in that belief is that we got it. Yeah. We have the information.
We know it now.
Yeah. It's been made simplified. So I think a map is a useful thing, and map is, this sort of, in this case, it's a metaphor that encapsulates a way of looking at reality. These are useful things, right? But they are not the thing. Yeah. A map is not the sunset. A map is not the gravel beneath your feet. It's not the breeze that you feel.
Yeah.
We're a long ways off from drama.
Oh,
let's get to
okay.
What you do with theater.
Right. So, I
want to hear about Owatonna.
Okay. All right. Wait. Yeah. So I think my interest in drama, it would have started after I became a Christian. It might have been triggered. Let's say I lost interest in university, so I dropped out of university. But I went back to finish my degree. And I engaged with university to the extent of 3 hours per 2 weeks. That's the level of my engagement with university. 3 hours in 2 weeks. The things I attended were, there was a weekly tutorial I attended because I liked the fellow, Dr. Roger Gard. I liked him, so I would go and be with him. And then there was a drama workshop with a British playwright called Simon Gray. And he did a workshop on Shakespeare's King Lear. And it was just workshop, so we didn't performance, but we worked through. And again, it was about asking questions. And he said, well, what's going on here? What should you do about this? And it's just getting you to think about what the words were doing. And I mean, Shakespeare's amazing because he puts the stage directions in the words. he rather than saying enter, or do this or do that, he loads it all in there. He's a remarkable fellow. But I think that got me stirred up about writing. And when I left university, I didn't do much for a while. Well, I was fine because I became a Christian, and I was. I started working at a church and things like that, and eventually I thought I would go into teaching, and I ended up back in Bedford. I applied for teaching jobs all over the UK. I was down in Brighton, which is on the south, up in Newcastle, which is in the northeast, but then I spotted this job in the junior school of this school where I had been. It was in the miscellaneous ads. I hadn't been looking anywhere, but in miscellaneous ads. And I was interested because it was teaching English, but you could also teach sport. I love sport. And it also gave you accommodation. I mean, what's not to like? And so I applied, and I got this job. And I started when the science teacher, and I love this interdisciplinary thing. The science teacher was into drama, so he would build sets and direct plays. He would do some performance. But
middle school?
So middle school would be like middle years, so up to like age 13, something like that. And I thought, well, if I want to know about plays and playwriting, I need to be involved. So I started getting involved in local amateur dramatics and things. And I loved it. I loved it. You know, Proctor and the Crucible and all sorts of things. I want a run of being killed in plays. So obviously Proctor, I get killed in the Crucible. Wait Until Dark was a thriller. I got run over. I was in.
So wait a minute, you're a teacher?
Yeah, but I was in amateur dramatics. Yeah, it's amateur
with
stuff.
The school?
No, this was outside the school, in bed, just the college.
Okay, so you had ended up at the school.
Yeah. So, but I'm wanting to learn about how drama works. So you have to do it.
So this is your philosophy that if I'm going to teach this.
Well, no, I wanted to write plays. I wanted to. Yes,
then you have to be part of it, though.
Yeah,
I think
I identified that being in an audience, if you go to a play, the writer, the dramatist, takes you through an experience. So it can take you places that you might not otherwise go, and it's more direct than like if you go to a film or a TV where there's a barrier. So it takes you on a journey.
You're
and I like
actually
that.
there.
Yeah. And I remember, I haven't completed many plays, but one I wrote, which was set around the First World War. I did a lot of reading around the First World War. And in the end, it's about the central character having to be brought to the position of acknowledging God. He'd gone out to try and create this life of art and writing poetry and everything, and then the First World War came. The world came and swept him away from that, and he was disappointed in love, in hope, and everything. But he comes to a point, and there's an old guy in the play right at the end. He says, "It's really easy. If you want to turn to God, it's really easy." And I say, "Well, no, I can't do it. It's too much." And the guy just draws a line on the stage. He has a piece of chalk and he just draws on the floor and says, "You just step across. It's really easy. Just step across." And that's where the play ended. So you don't see him step across. Because I wanted to leave the audience with that sense of what would I do. Obviously, I've short circuit. I haven't got all the whys and wherefores of should you believe or shouldn't you believe, or why and what's going on in the world and so on. But I like that idea that you could take people to that place where they can make a decision.
Yeah, so that's something besides entertainment. That's something besides distraction.
Well, yeah. I was going to say. I mean, is entertainment ever just entertainment? I don't think it is. It's always got. I mean, I remember being taught as a teacher that I am a neutral being. I'm not there to give my thoughts upon anything. I'm to introduce the children to this, that, and the other, and they are to, educate, which is great. But we're not neutral beings. You cannot be neutral beings. We are somebody.
That falls apart.
We are somebody. Someone's always trying to put some point of view across, do something to you. There are no neutral beings.
Sure.
And, in C.S. Lewis's words, we're either headed towards heaven or we're headed towards hell every day of our lives.
And so you detected the same thing in Darwin and Dawkins.
Oh, Oh, yeah. So, yes, I mean, there's precious little. I'm a great fan of real science, empirical science. Great fan. And a lot of stuff masquerades as real science, which isn't, as far as I can see.
So you have this thing that acknowledges the invisible. You acknowledge motives, you acknowledge bias, and you want very much, I'm detecting patterns, you want very much for things to be very real.
Yeah.
You want people to be
yeah,
real.
I mean, very, very real. I mean, you mentioned Owatonna. So, yeah, I want to write this play about the bank at Owatonna. So anyone who listens to this, you have to go to Owatonna, to the bank on the corner of the square. I think who owns it? One of the big banks has got it at the moment. But you can go in there. You know, go. I mean, they call it the most beautiful bank in the world. In the world, okay? In Minnesota.
A short drive from where we're sitting.
That's right, 45 minutes, I think it is.
Yeah, I suppose.
You know, and it's an incredible piece of art. It's also a functioning bank, and has been a functioning bank. And I was just overawed. Jennifer and I just, went to Owatonna one day for something, and parked by the square and looked at this building. Thought, oh, this was a bit interesting. And we went inside and went, okay. And then the story behind it is extraordinary. These extraordinary people who came together. And I thought, I have to share this. It's like finding the new species of insect in your garden, isn't it?
Exactly.
How can you not share this story? It's remarkable, and it's very beautiful, and it's here, and it should be treasured. And
isn't it amazing how radical or difficult it seems to accept that something exceptional is right in front of you?
Mm. Yeah. But life, we are. I've had lots of engagement with students and children and so on, and my story is always: you are unique. There has never been anyone like you. There will never be anyone like you. You are precious and special. That's not to say you're the best of the. I'm not trying to praise you up. I'm stating a matter of fact. You are unique, and no one will ever know you as you are. Only God can know you as you are, and
that's the invisible stuff that I'm detecting in you. Like you haven't changed their nature. You haven't altered them, except in their attitude or stance towards themselves.
Yeah.
You're suggesting maybe a thinking cap.
Yeah.
We might say a lens. We're more used to the idea of a lens through which you see reality.
Yeah. Well, one of the writers I admire a great deal is Charles Dickens. I love reading his books. And I came across him in my final year of university. I think I'd read Hard Times when I was younger and didn't like it because it seemed to be, didactic or something. I didn't get on with it. But I was in my final year. I didn't care about my finals, which is another story. But I was in this tutorial with another student. There was two of us and the tutor. And the tutor saying, in the build-up to the final exams, it says to us, anything else you want to look at, in these last sessions? And my peer said, Dickens. And the tutor looked at me and I said, yeah, that's fine, because I didn't care. And he said, well, any particular book you'd like to read? And she said, Little Dorrit. And I'd never heard of Little Dorrit. And he looked at me and I said, yeah, that's fine. So I then went away and read Little Dorrit. And it was fantastic. I loved Little Dorrit. And I've dramatised Little Dorrit, which takes some doing. They have made films and TV series of it since my dramatisation. No, I think one of the films was before my dramatisation. But I love Little Dorrit. It's 1,300 pages, 1,100 pages. I don't know, it's a lot. But one of to go to the point, Dickens, I think one of the reasons why it's so great is because he collects people. He collects, pictures, and he was just able to record people, pictures. Yes, he might, emphasize and, for comic effect or whatever, but his attention to detail. Some people criticize him and say, well, it's all detail and no substance. I would disagree with that. But his attention, the eye he had as an observer, to see things. I mean, who was it who said about, art is, it's about all about seeing. That's what an artist is trying to do, to see things. And I suppose the same with true science as well, whatever, actually learning to look at things, see things.
Yeah, that's the allegiance thing. Are you making things up? Are you constructing a fantasy? Or are you able to actually get outside of yourself and observe? Well, Where's your attention?
Yeah, and to go back to the onions, I mean, the subjective objective thing. I thought, well, objectivity is itself subjective, isn't it? And so,
because it's always observed.
Yeah. So in some way, we have to live in that balance. And again, I think that's where God is, because we are spiritual beings as well as physical beings. We have to live in that balance. That's where the good thing is. And when people veer away from that point of balance, that's when they get into trouble. They start calling themselves, I am Jesus, or they start thinking there is nothing but. I mean, C.S. Lewis did an essay called Nothing Buttery or something, where we talked about nothing but, we are nothing but atoms, which is complete nonsense.
We've been at this for a bit.
Have we? Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies all round.
No, we're used to the long form here.
Oh, good.
Really. And I just want to kind of sound the warning that, we're probably winding down on this talk. But it's just like that tutor. Anything else? When little Dorrit came into your life. Anything else? Think especially about what you would have the Bethany community think about.
Well, I think what you have here is something very precious. And I was saying to someone earlier that I think it will be attacked for what it is. So you have to be ready for that. And so to know how to defend yourself, to be unafraid to defend yourselves. Know your enemy. And the attack can come in many forms, can't it? Whether it be legal or cultural or personal or who knows. But I think there's something very precious here, and it is to be cherished. I was very sad when I heard that the drama studies here were being reduced, cutbacks. Now I don't know the wherewithals of, budgeting and so on, but I would want to fly the flag for Bethany and what is here. And maybe I'm just looking at it as an outsider. I don't know the student experience, but I've met some of the people who are involved, and I take from them that they are good people, and what they're doing is good work, and it needs to be cherished and protected. And the interaction of different disciplines, it's really, really important. Modern education is about dividing up, and nature of modern science. You break up the science; it becomes more and more differentiated, so that you can't see from one part of the lab to the other. But you need to be able to interact with, perhaps I should conclude with this. Years ago, I came across an American professor of biology, and I think his name was Robert Frost, like the poet. I think he made a joke about that. But he gave a talk, and he said the secret of life is relationship. I can give you the meaning of life in one word: relationship. And that's relationship, us to the physical world, us to each other, us to God. It all comes down to that. I have used that single idea in my teaching so many times. I couldn't name them. I've done presentations on it because it's absolutely true. If we don't relate to the world about us, to the trees and the birds and the ground under our feet and the crops and things, we suffer. If we don't relate to the people next to us, to our neighbour, to our family, parents, brothers, sisters, we suffer. And if we don't relate to God, we're lost. We need it all. And that's what God wants to give us, life in abundance. And that's what I wanted when I first encountered the peacocks. Life in abundance. And God, there's a verse in the Bible, even to your grey hairs, I am he. I've got grey hairs now, and God is still God. And I never thought I'd be leaving England. I came to Minnesota, and it's been such a blessing to me. So thank you. And thank you to Bethany. It's been great being here.
Well, Bethany loves you back. You've developed relationships here, and we hope that our paths will cross in the future.
Amen to that.
We hope to see you back on campus, and I hear rumors that campus might come find you around the world.
Good.
So thank you to Richard Stokes. This has been Whistle the Feast. Get curious, be of good service, and discover what God has given you.